And we are live. Welcome, folks, to episode 3689 of the Survival Podcast. This is Tuesday, June the 17th, 2025. And today we're actually, I don't want to say redoing. We're modernizing and revisiting a topic that the last time we dug into very, very deeply, though this has been a running theme for the whole 17 years of the show, but the last time we really hardcore dug in deep to this subject as a standalone thing, 2012. Don't confuse symptoms with problems. And I don't actually mean your physical health, though it can apply to that, but it comes off of that's an analogy, right? What I mean is things like the idea that home prices are too expensive. Yes, that's a symptom. The boomers stole it, and that's why you can't afford a house when you're 27 is asinine. And I'll show it today how asinine it is. It's I hurt and I want something to blame. And there's dozens of things like this. We're going to go into specifically 3 of them today, but we could make a list of 80 things that are wrong in society. And most of it, at least in some piece or part, comes back to, you guessed it, fiat money. Fiat money creates fiat things. Fiat things are not designed to last, right? And fiat things, by the very nature of fiat, go up in price and not based on simply supply and demand. In fact, supply and demand is wrecked. Everything begins to fall apart. Why are we doing this today? Because if you want to cure an illness, the symptoms can, in fact, lead you to a cause. But if you treat the symptoms without identifying the cause, then what happens? You feel better, but you don't get better. Here's an example. You have a headache. I know, I'll take an aspirin tablet. And is that a terrible thing to do? No, as long as if you always have headaches, then this is what we know about a headache. It's not an aspirin deficiency. And simply coming up with a more natural seeming solution like, well, I'm not going to take aspirin, I'll use white willow bark. A headache is also not a symptom of a deficiency of white willow bark. Are you having a headache because you have really high blood pressure? Are you having a headache because you are overly stressed and haven't learned how to manage your stress? Are you having a headache because you have a fucking brain tumor? Right? Like, these are important things. Like, knowing what, like, the headache can just be a mild annoyance, or it can be an indication if you don't do something soon, you could end up 6 feet under. So we have to figure it out to fix it. If you're looking at all the problems in the world, and you have to realize, like, I'm going to show you yet again a website called WTF Happened in 1971. I've got some examples from it today. But one of the things I don't have set aside as a specific example is just political speech. Since the 70s moving through the 80s into the 90s and forward, the amount of political speech that has been emotionally based has exploded, and the amount that has been factually and logically based has eroded. You see the correlation there, right? So let's get you upset and angry at the other side, because that's how we win an election, but it's not how we solve the problem. We get you upset about money and blame somebody else, and you might feel better just like you took the aspirin tablet, but you don't have any more money. And both sides of the aisle, if we're talking from a political vantage point, have promised you that it's the other side's fault, and if you give them power, they'll fix it. Both sides have had partial and complete power in our form of government many times between 1971 and 2025, and none of the problems have been solved. In fact, all the problems are worse. So what that tells you is we have a mass, mass formation psychosis was the term, I think, that either Robert Malone or the guy from Black Horse, whatever, one of them used this term to describe the way people act during COVID was, this mass psychosis, mass formation psychosis. Well, that's just identifying one place that it showed up. This mass formation psychosis is in everything, in this misdiagnosis of the problem by focusing on the system. And it's been going on for a very long time. But again, there's an inflection point in 71. If you don't believe that now, Most of you probably do. But if you don't believe it now, you will by the end of today's episode. And hopefully you'll start to realize that even the things that are not your problem at all, or not you didn't do anything at all. You didn't cause it all. You have no causation that you've added to in this. You really are a victim if you insist on using that word. It doesn't matter. Like, no amount of special pleading, no amount of replacing one ass clown with another, no amount of any of that shit is actually going to address the root cause. You're asking the people who are the cause to become the solution. You know, they say the problem is the solution in permaculture. That's true, but it does not apply to politicians. It does not apply to politicians. Like, it does apply if you use it externally from the politician. So the politicians and the bureaucrats and the policy and the fiat system are the problem. Therefore, they cannot be the solution because they exist outside of your circle of control. You have no control over them. One of the dumbest things that I ever hear on radio, and when I occasionally take every day I take my grandkids back to their mom after they've been here for homeschool, or I have to go out for other things. Maybe Dorothy sends me to the store. Sometimes I'll turn on AM radio and I listen. And the thing that will make me turn the dial immediately, other than infinite commercials, is we're going to hold their feet to the fire. Really? How? I'd love to get one of these big time talking heads, like in a place they can't weasel out and get away and say, oh, I got to cut the break because you're a caller. Like, actually have them on my show and ask one of these people like Hannity or Ben Shapiro or any of these fucking people. It doesn't matter. Glenn Beck. I don't, any of them. Even Tucker Carlson, and say, what do you mean by that? And do you realize how ridiculous it sounds to anybody who's paid attention to life over the last 50 years? And watch them wiggle and try to get out of it. And, oh, you're going to write your senator. Okay, my nephew was a page for a senator. Let me tell you what happens when you write your senator. The pages read it, they mock you, and they laugh at it. They tick a box to say it was pro or anti something, and they don't even care what it really is. Because a lot of times when you read these letters, like from what my nephew told me, you can't even tell what the person's really upset about. A lot of this is just like older people being emotional and venting and feeling like it's what's the word I'm looking for? Cathartic that they sent the letter, right? And then they shred it. It's gone. No one cares. Your senator will never see it. It applies to your congressman too. They'll never see it. Every once in a while they pull one out that'll make a good PR thing, and they have meet the people. It doesn't ever actually do anything. So you're not going to write them letters. Like 65-70% of these people that are in elected offices are going to get reelected no matter what. I mean, literally, we have a person that lost to a dead guy back during the Bush administration, John Ashcroft. So just by having the right initial after your name, you're not going anywhere. If you do finally primary them, or they exist in maybe the 30% of seats that are somewhat swing seats, then they go from making a couple $100,000 a year as a congressman, enriching themselves from lobbyists giving them money, to being a lobbyist making $700,000 to $1 million a year. So in what freaking fantasy world of yours will you ever hold these people feet to the fire, right? So what I'm saying is that's all the symptoms are manifestations of that problem. It's an economic problem, it's a bureaucrat problem, and it's a politician problem. And so what? This is the system everybody lives in. Now look around you, and there's people living fucking kick-ass lives. They're loving life. They're enjoying themselves. They're building shit. They're making things happen. I'm not talking about lackadaisical morons with, drink more coffee at work than you do work jobs that got in some cushy place and don't really care and are out in la la land. I'm talking about people that are like, I'm going to build this business, or I'm going to make this thing happen. I'm going to seek this career. I'm going to get good at doing this thing. I'm going to invest my money smartly outside of this bullshit, right? I'm going to leverage the principles that make wealthy people wealthy in this. If the game is so rigged, why can't you just play it the right way to win it, right? Because somebody's doing it, right? Instead of bitching about you can't get a house, you need to be asking yourself, well, how can I get a house? What do I do to get myself into a house, right? If you won't take that step, then all you are is a chronic crybaby, whiny ass little bitch. And I know some of you don't want to hear that, especially some of you that will see this probably not today, but later when one of your friends or family members says, hey, you should listen to this guy. You're going to screw him. He said everything's my fault. Absolutely not what I said. And if you're in that mindset right now, you have two choices going forward in this presentation today. Put that shit in your back pocket, shut up for a minute, and maybe you'll learn something. Or go do something else and HFSP. If you don't know what that means, it means have fun staying poor. And I don't just mean monetarily. I mean emotionally. I mean culturally. I mean everything that you want in life is about understanding the principles that we're going to talk about today. Diagnose the problem, understand what you can't do to solve the problem, and then solve the problem outside of the problem within your area of control. It's up to you whether you want to do that or not. Before we get into it, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsors of the day. We're talking about problems. It's a problem? A dog that eats your remote control to your TV set. When you get a new one, he does it again. And then you have to take him to the vet, and you have to have an x-ray on your dog to see if he ate the battery. And when he did, you have to spend $1,000 to save the idiot dog's life because he ate the battery out of the remote control. A problem is you get chickens and you get a dog, and a dog eats all the chickens. The problem is you get a dog, you open the gate, and the very expensive dog that you love runs down the road and disappears forever or gets hit by a car. Or you have to chase him for a half a day to finally get him back in the house. And there's a lot of other problems that can come from owning a dog. But a dog shouldn't be a problem. No, in fact, what a dog should be is a valuable member of the home and the homestead, right? And the way you do that is through training. And hold on just a second, guys. I have to take care of something. All right. The dog should be a valuable member of the home and the homestead. That comes down to training, and you can learn to do that yourself at canineacademy.us. That is Joel Ryle's website. Joel's actually going to be on the site, on the show tomorrow. And I look forward to talking to him because I always enjoy talking to Joel. He's a personal friend. I helped Joel develop this website and this program for dog training. And I told him that if he wanted to scale his business beyond just providing protection dogs, this was absolutely the way to do it. That there are, tens and hundreds of millions of dog owners in America, and most people struggle with training their dog. The thing is, a dog, in a lot of ways, is almost like a computer. The programming in results in the output. Now, it takes more time than a computer because it's a biological organism with its own little dog brain that comes up with its own ideas about things. But it's actually not that hard to do. I have a wonderful dog in my home now named Belle. I actually got her from Joel. And she's a wonderful, well-behaved dog. If I go out now and I call her, whistle for her, and she doesn't come, I know what it means. It means she's too far away to hear me because that dog is there at high rate of speed. And that's from the type of training that Joel teaches. And if you want to just see what it's like to learn from Joel, get over to canineacademy.us and then take the problem-solving library and go ahead and go through that. It's free, but it's essentially run the same way he does his training classes. Next up today is Above Phone. And they have something out right now that I think you might really gain a lot from if you go get it and download it. It is 5 must-change privacy settings for your iOS or Android phone. Of course, Above Phone provides excellent phones that have their own private app store that don't spy on you, that prevent a lot of the nonsense that the Android and Google Play Store and iOS Store and App Stores, all that do, all the data of yours that gets sold to other people. And that's a great solution. But if you're not ready to make that jump yet, maybe you should know about what you can do to actually make your device more private as it is. It's not hard to do. So get on over to abovephone.com/TSP and get this free guide. It's really, it's really great. It's super easy to follow, and consider picking up some stuff from Above Phone, like a phone, a laptop, or a tablet. I have an Above Phone and I have an Above Book. They're both awesome, and they take back your privacy, your right to privacy, and your right to control your own technology. And remember, if you are buying something from Above Phone and you are an MSB member, well, the good news is you get a discount, and a significant discount. I'm talking $75 off any phone at abovephone.com. All right, now let's get into this again. What most people call a problem is actually a symptom. And I know that you feel like, no, that's not right, because when I can't buy a house, or I can't afford to pay my student loans, or I can't afford to go to college, or whatever it is, or I paid to go to college, I owe a bunch of money now and I can't find a job. You say that for me, that's a problem. Okay, let's go back to the headache. When you have a headache, the headache for you is a problem, but it's not the problem. Do you understand what I mean? I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. I'm not saying it's not inconvenient. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do something about it because I think you should. But what I can tell you is if you have a headache and you say somebody else should do something about it, you're going to keep having a headache till it goes away by itself. Do you understand the difference? I get that it feels like a problem, but what you're really concerned about, if you actually want the symptom to go away, which is I can't afford a house, identify the problem and determine what can be done about it. So again, your headache. If your headache is because you're stressed, then your solution is to eliminate or mitigate the stress, to learn techniques to deal with stress. Maybe it's a daily meditation. Maybe it's just a daily walk. And maybe you have to identify what point in the day do I reach my peak of stress. And right before that peak of stress, you build in a break that prevents the peak from ever being hit. It could be that simple. If the problem that's causing the symptom that is the headache is you have a tumor growing in your brain, hopefully it's something that can still have something done about it, and you probably need somebody in there with like a neurosurgeon or something like that to get rid of it. Yeah? Right? They're two different solutions because the problem was actually different, even though the symptom manifested itself the same way. If your symptom of a headache is due to the fact that you have high blood pressure is also a symptom. It's not the problem. Is it because your arteries are clogged? Is it because you're stressed? Right? Like, why is that the case? You have to find the underlying problem and address it. Now, here's the thing. Most of the problems at the macro level in the world today, can you afford this thing? Can you find a job? Right? All of the things that we worry about the most, all the things that the politicians preach about, every single one swears to God, their hand upon the Holy of Holies, which is the ledger at the Federal Reserve, and swears it's the other guy's fault and I can fix it. And they know they're lying both times that they say the words, right? So they can't be your solution. And the underlying problems, such as, well, the Federal Reserve keeps printing money and artificially adjusting interest rates, is also something you have no say over. So then turning your anger to the boomers, many of whom right now are living on Social Security and barely getting by and living far worse than a lot of the Gen Zs and young millennials that are talking shit about them, okay, is not going to solve your problem either. Even if it were true, the boomers stole it. They didn't, right? I mean, really, like, I don't know what fantasy-ass world you're living in to buy into such a pile of crap. So your grandmother stole it from you. That's what you're telling me. Now, I can understand the young idiot whose grandma lives in a McMansion, right? I can understand them falling for it a little bit, but can you look past your grandma to other people's grandmas and realize how dumb you sound? You sound really, really stupid. All these people, within the next about 30 years, let's say 80% of them will have passed away. You'll still have your problems, so can you really blame the people who aren't here anymore? If you want to go back far enough with the whole fiat money thing, you can really trace its initial genesis in this world to 1913, but that was still hard money. But definitely can go back to 1933. Definitely can go back to 33, and you can certainly go back to 71. Who was in charge of things in 71? That would be the silent generation and the greatest generation, 2 generations prior to the boomers. Did they do it? People in that generation did it. But most of the people in those generations didn't have much say in this either. Do you have a say? Why do you think it was different back then? Do you think like 50 years ago a vote counted more than it does today? Do you really? Because it didn't. It's the same system. So if we can't fix the root problem, then we have to design in our area of control around the root problem, creating our own space that gives us what we want. Now, that's not something you'll ever hear a politician or bureaucrat say. Ever. Because that will not get you elected. Because people don't vote for someone to tell them the truth. They vote for the person that tells them mostly what they want to hear. Whichever side gives you more of what you want to hear is the side you pull the lever for. Even when you are morally motivated in the right direction. For instance, I believe a lot of people voted for Donald Trump in the last election because they look at, for instance, what's going on in women's sports as wrong. And did he address that as best he could up to this point? Yes. So that's like one thing that will change. But this is what I know about most of the people that made that vote. You did it for somebody else. You didn't do it for you. Most of the people that made that choice based on that thing were not people that were directly affected or have their daughters directly affected by that issue. You just knew that it was wrong. And does it help you get a new house? Even if they completely fix that issue, will it help you get a new house? So even the things that we often can change through the electoral process, to a degree anyway, still don't, the real problems that affect everybody equally, other than the people who've designed their life outside of it, they're never going to change through voting. Now, they can eventually change through it, or they can eventually collapse and therefore mandate change by the fact that they don't work anymore at all for anyone. But until that happens, you're stuck with it. So let's look at a few. Healthcare. Healthcare, it's expensive because of greed. This is why you have half the fucking country celebrating a murderer who murdered a father of two young boys by shooting him in cold blood in the back of the head because he was the CEO of a healthcare company. Now, it turns out when you dig into Luigi's background, he had a very bad injury. He got a lot of medical care for it. It still hurt. He wasn't denied anything. He wasn't some poor person whose grandma died because the mean insurance company wouldn't do a transplant. He's from a wealthy family. He had good insurance. The insurance wasn't the company that he shot. He decided he wanted to do it because he was mad about a problem and thought he knew that this person represented the problem. But is health care expensive today because of greedy CEOs of health insurance companies? I'm not going to say they help anything, but they're not the problem. They're not the problem. They're a symptom. They're a natural result. I mean, if you are going to be in the, like, people want health insurance, right? Okay, so there's a market demand for it. So there should be companies that provide it. Very few people are like, we should just get rid of health insurance. I personally am in the camp of we'd probably be better off if we did. If we got rid of health insurance, it would immediately bring the cost of care down for everybody and get rid of all the milking that's going on in the system, which is greedy by design. It's not expensive because the people are greedy. It's expensive because the incentives are perverse in the system. And nothing shows it more, and this all really took off. The inflection point, like so many things I'm going to show you today, was in 1971. What I have for you here is a chart, and let me blow it up a little bit for you. That should help. A chart that shows the growth of physicians versus administrators relative to the population. So this is population adjusted. You know, how many per 100,000 American citizens are there doctors and health administrators in America? And the little line, for those on the audio only at the bottom, is a red line that barely grows from 1970 all the way up to 2025. Does it go that far? Let me check. 2009. So this only just continues on this trend. It never reverses. The chart goes to 2009. And there's this explosion. And first of all, back in 1970, the number was pretty much equal. For every doctor, there was an administrator. Okay? It's 1970 that it begins to bifurcate. The physicians per individual in the country barely grows at all. It's in the neighborhood of about, I would say, maximum across time, a total cumulative of about 10%. The growth in administrators is north of 3,000%. I would say, looking at this graph, 3,200% is about right. By 2009, again, that's only gotten worse. So how would we expect that the cost of healthcare would not go up with a system so overburdened? Again, I'll say this again, a 3,200% rise in the number of administrators. And those are all, like, they're not free. Every one of those people is a real cost. And, these are people that are going to earn at the absolute bottom end, like medical coding, some job you could teach something like a monkey to do in a week. They still earn $30,000 a year, up to people making $500,000. You think the cost of all that labor adds up to something? So this alone has blown the cost of healthcare through the roof. And any insurance product is directly proportional to the risk and the expense of covering the risk. And what I mean is, you're going to see that if you have a $5,000 car and a good driving record, your insurance on like damage you could do to somebody else is going to be pretty consistent with somebody with a $50,000 car, because the damage you can do with the two cars is equal, right? So your liability for others, that insurance is going to be pretty constant. But if I'm insuring my $5,000 used car and you buy a $50,000 new car, and you're insuring your own car in the event that something happens to it that the other party's not insured for, I'm going to pay a lot less for my insurance than you are. Simple to understand, right? Okay, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to pay less for insurance because I'm insuring a cheaper thing. In a catastrophic loss, the maximum my insurance company is going to have to cut me a check for. I buy the car. I go out on the street with it right after they give me the card that says I'm covered. I'm driving down the road and a tractor trailer smashes in the front of my car. Totally not my fault. Tractor trailer guy doesn't have insurance. And now my insurance company has to pay me a replacement value of the vehicle. Fortunately, I ain't dead. I'm not even in the hospital. I made it somehow. It's just damage beyond being worth repairing. The maximum check they're going to cut me is $5,000. If I even get that. That's it. If the same exact thing happens to you in your $50,000 car, the maximum check they have to cut is $50,000. So the risk versus the cost of the risk becoming real to the company sets the price of the product. So the reason health insurance is expensive is because healthcare is something that people are, I guarantee you, 99% of people with a health insurance policy are going to hit the risk profile. In other words, they're going to use the insurance. And the cost of care is very expensive. So, of course, the insurance is expensive. How can you have cheap insurance for something that is highly likely to actually be used that's very expensive? On top of it, the health insurance people expect today, they want what? They want effectively a car insurance policy with like a $10 copay to fill up your tank and a $20 copay to get your oil changes and your basic maintenance done. So I go in, they look at my freaking belt, and they're like, okay, you need an oil change today, and you need your belt replaced. My auto insurance is going to do a $20 copay, and they're going to do $250 worth of work. That's the type of product people are asking for. And then they're screaming it's expensive. And then the government mandates that the insurer provide that type of service, and then says, but if you're poor, we'll let you get it really cheap. And we'll do that by inflating the rates of people who are not poor. And the more money you make, the more you have to pay for your insurance. And we'll do that with an artificial thing called Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, where if you don't qualify, you have to buy from the insurance companies. And the people who do qualify will cover it with the spread. And you think you're going to fix that by electing Bernie Sanders? Do you know how stupid you have to be? Do you know how willfully ignorant you have to be to believe that? I'm sorry, it is. That's exactly what it is. We have our primary root cause is a bloated system with fiat incentives, where the doctors are actually incentivized to write more prescriptions because they can bill the insurance company at a higher rate if they give you more prescriptions. That's actually written into the bill coding. Meaning if I'm a doctor and I have you on 3 prescriptions, when you come in for that office visit that I have to put on your insurance and I can't really charge you shit for, the insurance company will pay me more money if I prescribe more drugs for you. What do you think I'm going to do if I'm a doctor? I'm going to prescribe you more drugs. Even if I don't intend to. Subconsciously, that's going to hit because I want to make my BMW payment and send my daughter to freaking, to Vassar or Yale or some bullshit, right? I mean, it's going to happen. I have to fund for I'm a doctor. I got to have a country club membership. My wife needs to go there and socialize. So I'm going to do the things that make me more money. If you put perverse incentives into a system, you end up with a perverse system. So you're going to have to figure a way out of that. We'll get to that in a bit, but it's also based on complete fiat systems, fiat incentives as well, right? Because now the hospital can borrow a fuck ton of money to buy a really expensive piece of diagnostic equipment and make payments on it. But now they would rather have it sit and not do anything than use it to provide a scan for somebody who can't pay them $900. What world does that make sense? And how many administrators are involved in the procurement of that piece of equipment? The whole system is designed poorly by design. It's an intentional poor design because it makes a lot of people very rich. So when you say greed is part of the cause, you're right. But all the little players in the game, they're not the greedy people. The people pulling the strings at the top are, and they're not CEOs of health insurance companies. If you provided healthcare at an affordable rate, then insurance companies would provide insurance at an affordable rate to insure you for healthcare. Why wouldn't they? Just like they'll charge you less money to insure a $5,000 car or a $500,000 house than a $50,000 car or a $5 million house. It's very simple. And if insurance was the problem, that wouldn't be the case, right? It would be very expensive to insure a $100,000 house, but it's not. See how that works? Right? It's very expensive to insure a house on the beach because when there's a hurricane, there's going to be a flood. So they'll say, well, if you want flood insurance, that's a separate policy. So you can afford everything but the flood insurance. But who chose it? You. And who chose the location? You. Who chose the risk? You. And so the insurance company is only pricing the product at what's necessary to not go out of business. Insurance companies have to make a lot of money because sooner or later they have to pay a lot of money. Sooner or later, some mass thing happens all at once, and it puts a strain on them. If they don't have a huge cash reserve, they go bankrupt. And in fact, the government forces them to keep sufficient reserves to handle a significant portion of their policies coming due all at once. So the whole system's designed to make it expensive. But the real problem is the care is expensive. Therefore, insuring against the care will be expensive too. I don't know why anybody doesn't understand that except that they do not wish to, right? If it's such a racket, then you set up an insurance company and you do it. You show us how to do it right. Somebody mentioned health shares. We'll get to that. That is one of the solutions. But we're still on problems for a little bit more. Let's talk about the next one. College is broken. Boy, there's a lot of reasons for that. But the number one thing that gets laid out right now, because kids are lazy. These lazy-ass kids are going to school and they're getting degrees in gender studies, and they're spending $25,000 a year plus books and lodging, and they're borrowing all this money. They're borrowing 4-year degree and some useless bullshit, and they're borrowing $200,000 to do it, and then they're crying that they can't pay their loan. You know, it's not true of all of them, but there's enough of them that that's literally their profile. I'll give it to you. That exists. Did they set up the system? We just talked about not blaming the boomers that you can't buy a house, right? Should we blame the 19-year-old college student who's going to Columbia for Columbia's policies? Should we? Should we blame that college student who's been told since they were 5 years old in kindergarten that if you don't go to college, your life will just be completely useless, and don't worry about it and just borrow the money and pay it back when you get a good job? Do we think the 19, 20-year-old kid is smart enough after 12, 13 years of mental conditioning by professionals to that one end, to that one outcome being the most important thing, to make that decision at that age? Really? Because I could manipulate most of you into doing some serious bullshit if you gave me 2 hours. You give me 2 hours with you in a room that you're not allowed to leave, and I could get you to do some shit you wouldn't believe. If I told you before I did it that you would do it, you probably would then mentally lock on, I'm not doing that. But if I wrote down what I was going to make you do and you gave me 2 hours, I'd probably have you do it before those 2 hours were up. Even if it was something you would swear you would never do. So if I could do that to you in 2 hours with basic psychology and mental exercises, right? Then what are we doing when we start this messaging to a child at the age of 5? Johnny, Susie, if you don't go to college, you're going to be scrubbing toilets for the rest of your life. And we bring in all these people to do these little seminars about how wonderful it would be and how you could be a wonderful thing if you just go to this magical place called college. And then Johnny or Susie gets to being 18 years old and looking at the exit plan for high school and says, I really don't know what the fuck I want to do. And in their head, they need to be a doctor or a lawyer or some highfalutin thing. And that doesn't interest them, but they've been given a default. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you go. And then we make the money flow like rain. We give 17, 18, 19-year-old kids blank checkbooks, $25,000, $50,000, $70,000 a year in loans. And don't worry, you don't have to repay them anytime soon. It's okay. It's fine. You can go until you're done with school, and you can stay in school for 5 years, 6 years, and keep borrowing more money. You're afraid about how to afford your dorm fees? Don't worry, you can borrow money for that too. And remember, it's the most important decision you'll ever make in your life, Johnny and Susie. You got to do it. And then it's their fault. How sick in the fucking head do you have to be to believe that bullshit? I mean, nothing I just told you isn't true. But if that's all the truth, how can you come to the conclusion that college is expensive due to lazy kids and just greedy colleges? I believe the college administrators are greedy, but you know what greedy people do? What benefits them most economically, right? So what I'm saying is you put greedy people into a system, they follow the incentives of that system in order to get the outcome they're looking for, which is more money, more power, more control, more clout, more authority, more social capital. So do you think any college wants to be like, you know what? For the next 10 years, we have plans to add nothing to our school. No new buildings, no new programs, no new nothing. Let alone, hey, we've identified that these 5-degree programs that we used to do really well with no longer really benefit our students. So we're going to eliminate them because we don't want to sell a product that doesn't actually help the customer. Like, no, they don't want to do that. We're putting in a brand new quad, and we're putting in a science building, and we're having 3 new programs, and exactly one of them is exactly how many genders are there really, right? That's how they get clout. That's how they email their alumni and go, hey, we need some money. They never email your alumni and say, hey, we need some money so that we can help more students get their degrees. No, we just put in this giant building and we want to put in another one. And if you give us enough money, we'll put a little gold plate on the stairs with your name on it. And you can share in the accolades. And how do you fund for all this? Because those alumni are only ever going to give you so much money. You need tuition dollars. Well, where does it come from? It comes from loans. So what does the college then do? The college simply does everything that the students ask for that can be purchased with money. New buildings, more recreation, new programs, what doesn't matter. They're paying the bill. When we can't afford it, we'll just raise tuition a little bit and they'll borrow more money. The government will give it to them and the lenders will give it to them. And so you get a system that could not exist in a free market. Right now, the value of a degree, and let's say something reasonable, not highly specialized, but reasonable. Let's say business management, right? A business management degree from the right school anyway is of reasonable utility. It really is. I mean, I know I beat up on them, but I'm not going to go all the way to the level of like an aerospace engineer or something like that. But a business management degree. A degree in marketing from a school that actually has a solid marketing program. Marketers make companies fucking money. That's valuable. The value of those 2 degrees, a BA, right, or a marketing degree in 2025 is a fraction of what value it had in 1980. Inflation adjusted to an employer. If I'm an employer and I'm looking to build out my business and I want to bring a new, young, talented person in with not right out of school, maybe 3 to 5 years of experience, right? And they've worked for another company, maybe a smaller company than mine. They've got that young energy. They've got a good classic education, and they've got some real world experience. I put value on all 3 of those factors. The person, the credential, and the experience. All 3 have a value. You come to me today, I still do the same thing. And the value of the credential is a fraction of what it was 40 years ago. It just is. And if you ask any honest business leader the question, especially one that's like an older guy now, like older than me, that was hiring people back then and now is hiring people, they'll tell you honestly, yeah, it doesn't mean shit to me today. 1990 to 2025, it's a huge difference. Even 95, that's only 30 years, right? 95 to 2025. The value over 30 years has gone down exponentially, but the cost has gone up exponentially. That can't exist in a real market economy, can it? How can I sell something for more money than I did 10 years ago if it provides less value than it did 10 years ago? If there's actual competition in a real economy with a real market value is what sets a price. The answer is it can't do it. Now, if I'm really good at marketing it, maybe I can sell it to a small niche subgroup, but a mass market product like college going exponentially up in cost while the realized value goes exponentially down. So how can we blame anybody even in the system versus the people that are the architects and controllers of the system when every incentive in the system leads to this obvious outcome? You know what would be surprising? If the value of degrees didn't go down over the last 30 years. If the cost of degrees, inflation adjusted, didn't go up exponentially in the last 30 years. Those would be surprising outcomes. If colleges didn't add a whole shitload of programs that bring no value to the graduating student at all when they go to look for a career. That would be surprising if that didn't happen. I see no way that there would be any outcome other than the one we're looking at right now based on the incentives inside the system, which are perverse, and therefore make the system itself perverse. So you have to get outside of that thinking. We just basically have loan-fueled admin bloat and let's say amenity bloat. Because I'm telling you, like all the colleges want a bigger library. They want to put some alum guy's name on a building, but he'll never write a check big enough for the whole building, right? So they need a whole bunch more money. So they just raise tuition and market harder. And what's happened over the last 40 years in earnest, so this is 85 to now, right, is that colleges have gotten very aggressive, even pool sharing the mass market campaign, every child should go to college because it's the only way to grow at this point. It's the only way to grow at this point if you're a college. Well, now it's not working anymore. We're hitting the enrollment cliff, a population fall off, and people finally waking up to what you're paying for is not what you're getting, right? Like it's one thing to be pissed that if I go buy a nicely loaded F-150 right now, it's going to cost me about $60,000. It'd be another thing if I was still buying the F-150 as it was made in 1976. And I know you guys like the square body and all, but mechanically, But if I'm buying the 1976 Ford today and I'm paying 60 grand for it, and it's not even been taken care of, it's still the same piece of shit it was 10 years after the guy bought it who barely changed the oil on time, then I got to, that's the cost of college education. Unless it's a very specific degree profile for someone with the aptitude to make the most of it after graduation, it is you're overpaying for whatever you get. Even semi-useful degrees like marketing and advertising and, you know, business management and whatever else you come up with in those realms. It doesn't have to be gender studies, business studies, or communications. I mean, you want to talk about a phony degree that sounds like something. Communications is there. What about housing is unaffordable due to landlords and flippers? Right? That's what it is. It's the landlords and the flippers. It's BlackRock's fault. It's the boomers. I mean, really. I have never heard a Gen Z or young millennials, so somebody 25 to 32-ish, somewhere in that range, complain about housing and not within 3 sentences use the word boomer. Never. Why? Because it's been effectively marketed. And let me tell you, all this effective marketing it really is. You know, when you were a kid and you had a brother or a sister and you fucked something up, but you knew they fucked something up too. In fact, maybe they fucked something up worse. Or maybe dad wasn't sure who did it. So maybe you could blame them, even if they didn't do anything at all. And if you didn't have a brother or a sister like that, remember you had a friend like that, right? And you could do the teacher, or they were at your house, so you told your dad your friend did it. Or you got in trouble and you said, well, Marcus made me do it or whatever. It's the same thing. It's please don't look at us. It's boomers. And the people saying it, that are inside the system that are still managing and controlling the system, I'll give you this. Most of them are boomers because older people tend to be at the top of the hierarchy at any given state and time, which means in the future, it'll be all us old crusty Gen X fuckers will take their place, and then we'll die off and retire. And then you fucking millennials will take over. And you know what? I said it the wrong way. Millennials, not you millennials. Millennials will take over. It won't get any better because the people at the top of that hierarchy driving the perverse system benefit from the perverse system. So they're not going to change it. I did all this work to get to the top, and now I benefit from it. I'm not changing this shit. That's because the system at its core is designed that way. Not going to change. It's not going to change. What causes this? Well, I didn't show you the charts for the education, but that's all right. Maybe I'll get back there. Let's just look at the symptom here in this chart. What I've got now on the screen, this is home value change versus income change over the last, let's see, this is from 1965 to 2021. And what you can see in this, there's a line at the top that goes up really, really rapidly. And that's the cost of a house. And then across the bottom, the darker line, that's inflation-adjusted income. So when you say it takes more effort to buy a house today than it did when your grandpa bought one, you're absolutely right. Now, your grandpa dealt with some shit you're not. Like, 18% interest rates. Yeah. Because a lot of you, the reason you can't afford a home today isn't so much just the price of the home. It's the price of the home compounded by the interest rate you have to pay on a mortgage. Well, how did we get there? I'll tell you how we got there. It's not hard to understand. The government knows that more people are happy and do what they're asked to do when they have a house. They just do. They know that people want houses. The government's all about getting people what they want as long as it doesn't restrict the government's power and authority and ability to control people. You see, you think the government doesn't want you to have what you want. You're half right. They don't want you to have what you want when it's at their expense to their ability to control you. So when you want more freedom and the government doesn't want to give up its power that obstructs that freedom, you're correct. They don't want you to have what you want. But it's not because they don't want you to have it. It's because they don't want to let go of what they have. But what does it cost the government to institute policies through the Federal Reserve Central Banking Authority so that more people will have houses? It doesn't cost them anything. They don't give up any power or any authority. In fact, they grow giant organizations like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, quasi-governmental fascist institutions. Oh, did I use the F word, the fascist word? Did you think that meant Nazis? It doesn't mean Nazis. Nazis were a particular variety of fascist. Most fascists that have existed, fascist governments that have existed, even openly calling themselves so, weren't Nazis. They weren't. You have what we call velvet glove fascism. America, that's your government. And it doesn't matter who's president, by the way. And then you have overt fascists like Franco in Spain. Franco didn't have, freaking Holocaust camps, did he? Right? We had fascist governments throughout the world. There's still some openly fascist today. They say this is a good thing. But what is the hallmark of fascism? Authoritarianism. All governments are authoritarian. They just wrap it in different marketing packages as they exercise their authoritarianism, right? Some are clearly more authoritarian than others. North Korea is more authoritarian than South Korea, which is more authoritarian than the United States, but they're all authoritarians, right? The real hallmark of fascism is when you have the state and private industry economically colluding and using the differences between the classes, right, as mediators, as leverage in between those differences to advance the goals of both the industry and the state. That's a textbook. I didn't make it up. That is a full-on, like college level economics explanation for fascism from an economic standpoint, right? And then we just have classic fascism. The government gives the industry money and tells them what to do and what to build, and then they can make as much more money as they want. That's classic fascism. That was fascism in Germany during World War II and leading up to it. And then you have what I call neo-fascism, which is a new fascism where the oligarch is the one with the money on top giving money to the politician, but it's still a collaboration. Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, these institutions are private in profit, but public in cost. Fascism, right? So we create this, and like this is a freaking dream come true for bureaucrats to expand the kingdom, to expand the power. Quasi-governmental fascist entities, that's great. So it didn't cost them anything to make more people able to buy a house. And it sounds noble, it sounds good, except it's fake. So it can't go on forever. So what did we do? Well, we incentivized builders to build really cheap houses really, really fast and keep the cost down. And at the same time, we opened up a spigot of money and made loans easy to get, including people that should never have been trusted with the credit necessary to buy a house. Okay. This led up to the 2008 crash. But everything, like we think like that was like an inflection point. Everything crashed and then we like washed out the market. That's what should have happened. 2008 should have flushed out the sewage in the market. It did not, did it? It wasn't 2 years later. They were still handing out TARP loans to people underwater, and they were already giving the kind of loans that created the problem again in the first place because people have to have a house. No one gets upset when a politician says up and says, if I'm elected, I will make sure that more of you can afford a home. But how about how, and what is the result of that how going to be? So what happened? They did all of those things, and then when the market needed to be flushed out, instead of letting, Aaron says they pumped it right back up. They did. But the how did they pump it up is what's interesting. So the prices came down a little bit, but not that much. And so they opened up the lending faucets again. And when they opened up the lending faucets again, they cut interest rates to the bone to spur the economy. Yeah. Because it wasn't just interest rates on homes. It was all the interest rates got cut. But that had a definite down push effect on home loan rates. So then people bought tons of houses with lower interest rates, and people do not buy a house. They buy a payment. This is the mentality of all real estate marketing in America. The first thing your real estate agent says to you isn't what's your budget. They might even say what's your budget, but that's not a real question. That's just to feel you out. What they really want to know, what payment are you looking for? Because I can have two $500,000 houses in two different neighborhoods with two widely different payments. Because the taxes in this neighborhood are twice the taxes in that neighborhood, even though they're both very expensive homes. See how that works? And often a person in the time we're talking about where interest rates are around 3%, a little over, a little under, right? Like I have a 2.95% interest rate on my home. And I bought in 2011, 13, something like 2013, I guess. 2012, I bought this place. And I have an interest rate at just under 3% with an annual percentage rate of about 3.1 from the compounding, right? So when you are paying that low of an interest rate, you can spend more money on the house. But when you're that low on interest, it's often the case when you look at principal and interest and property taxes, the property taxes might be more than the principal and interest. So the real estate agent, unless you say I'm a cash buyer, the minute you say that, what do you want? I'll get it for you, right? If you're not a cash buyer, you're like a first-time buyer especially, or you've owned one home and now you want to upgrade, right? What is the payment you're looking for? How much money do you have down? You're buying a payment. And then we find the house that you can get for about that payment. Same thing when you buy a car, right? And the car people never at least even do the paint of, well, what are you looking to spend? Unless it's a used car sales place and they sell cars for $4 or $5,000, then they'll ask that question because you might just whip out your checkbook or wads of hundreds or something and pay for it. When you go to a dealership and they're starting, like their starting price on cars like $35,000 and up, and nice cars on their lot are $60,000, $70,000, what payment are you looking for? And then they'll massage everything around that payment to sell you a payment, and then you get a car with the payment. See how that works? That's what they did to housing. What did this do? It drove the price that you could sell a house for up. And when it did that, a lot of people went, shit, now's the time. I can get a cheap loan. There's lots of buyers. I can sell this house, take the profit, roll it into the next house, And, oh, am I going to overpay for it? Sure, but it won't matter because it'll keep going up. It'll all fix itself in time. And people that acted then, it worked out for us. I'm not going to say it didn't, but I didn't steal it from you who's trying to buy your house today. I just followed the incentives of the system at the time, like anybody would with a brain. And if you could do it right now, don't act like you're some altruistic fuck, young people. Don't. I'm tired of your shit. I really am. Don't act like if they cut everything the way it was back in 2013, and you could walk in with 10 grand and buy a $300,000 house and walk out the door with a $2,100 payment, you wouldn't do it because you know you would. You're mad that you can't do what you're mad at somebody else for doing. And you think they stole it by doing the thing that you want to do. You realize how stupid you can only get there when your mind has been clusterfucked by design by the people that pull the strings. And it ain't the boomers, right? It's not the boomers that did it. And it's not your landlord. You think it's so easy to be a landlord. Go do it. Why don't you do it? That's another thing, right? They bought the houses and then they charge too much money and that inflates the value of the house. Well, why didn't you do it? Well, it'll always be insert bullshit excuse here, right? But the real reason is you don't have any money because you've lived your life with a poverty mindset. You've leveraged everything in your life without understanding what leverage was. And now you're upside down $200,000 for a degree that won't get you a job that's worth any more than being a barista at Starbucks. And it's the boomer's fault. I don't blame you for being mentally fucked up. I blame you for not being willing to listen to somebody who's telling you truth that you can verify for yourself. This is how we got here. A perverse system designed for today's gratification with no concern for tomorrow's effect. And most of the boomers had nothing to do with it, just like most of the Gen Xers had nothing to do with it, just like most of the silent had nothing to do with it, just like most of the GI generation had nothing to do with it, just like most of you Gen Xers had nothing to do with the system itself. You're on the outside looking in, but you want somebody to blame. And it's easier to blame your grandma or your great-grandma than take responsibility for the situation, even though they didn't do it, nor did you do it. So when did it really all break? Again, 1971. 1971, WTF happened in 1971.com is one of the most illuminating things you will ever look at. And again, those of you that have boomer hate in your heart, I want you to understand the average boomer in 1971 was a teenager or early 20s or even a little bit younger. How much power do you think you have in the world when you're 22 years old, which was the median age of a boomer in 1971? That means only people within a 4-year range up or down from that could even vote, right? The boomers at that time were mostly protesting wars, something a lot of young people seem to think is a really wonderful thing to be doing today. And I don't disagree with you. They were fighting for civil rights in the streets. They had zero impact on fucking economic policy. Nobody gave a fuck about them. You, Gen Z, are cared about way more than boomers of the day were. The boom generation was like Gen X 1.0. They did the same shit we did. We just came up at a time in Gen X where we were expected to not give a fuck. Okay? And we also grew up at the confluence of the old way and the new way as technology flipped over. So we adapted to it better. And then we kind of shut up and went on about our lives like mercenaries. And if anybody gets the blame, it should be us more than the fucking boomers. And yes, I know they'll put some lunatic boomer on TV shrieking about some bullshit. Or you'll talk to your grandpa and he'll say, so I can't lose my Social Security. And you say, yeah, grandpa, I know. I understand. Why don't we work on getting this younger generation out of that trap, but make sure people like you can collect Social Security to the rest of your life? And they shriek, don't touch my Social Security. And you think, what a greedy fuck. They are a victim of the same system you are. And you're on your track to be that person someday unless you take control of it. 71 is where it all went wrong. Every chart I'm showing, if you're on the video right now, shows the inflection point. Income gains widely shared in early post-war decade, but not since then. 1971 is the inflection point, right? I'm not going to do all of these, but let's look at some that are really obvious. I'd have to explain what that is. Real GDP per capita and median male income. So this is how much money the country makes, and this is the income for the average male in America. The GDP of the nation went through the roof. This is inflation adjusted, and the average male income remained flat to trending down versus GDP. Every place. 2 income families, right? This line right here, this is husband only working. 38% of families is today 21%, but the place where it went off the cliff, 1971. Some of the graphs, let's go to the graphs I missed showing you earlier. Growth in administrative staff, principals, and teachers in public school. The red line on the top, 95% growth in administrative staff, again, adjusted against the population, like per 100,000 people, there's a 95% growth in the number of administrators in public school. Yeah. There's a 39% growth in principals and assistant principals. I don't know why they're breaking assistant principals out as though they're not just part of the admin staff, but they did. But when you only look at principals, the growth in total principals out there, heads of schools, is commensurate with the growth in schools per capita, 10%, and the growth of teachers per capita, 5%. So all this talk about we need to pay teachers better so we'll get better outcomes in school is a lie. Because the spending follows the graph the same as the administrative staff. We spend way more today per student than we ever did, and we have the same amount of teachers, and they're paid relatively the same amount of money. So where's all the other money going? To these assholes right here. Now, is it their fault? No, they followed the perverse incentive. I want a job. Public schools hiring somebody to sit on their ass all day, move shit around, and make an announcement over the speaker. And I get health care. I get the benefits of a teacher, and I don't have to deal with the kids. I'm fucking taking the job if I got nothing else to do, ain't I? Right? I mean, this isn't only hard to understand if you want it to be. Here's inflation-adjusted spending per student. So remember, I just showed you that we have relatively the same amount of teachers since 1971 per student, okay? But our spending per student is up 150% when the number of teachers is up 10%, and everybody tells you a teacher is a hero that doesn't wear a cape and needs to be, God damn it, I didn't have it on the screen. Sorry about that. I didn't have it on the screen, did I? So there's the graph. That's the increase in spending, the blue line, right? And that's the student head count down here. Let me go back to the other one that I skipped on you. Sorry about that. Sorry about dropping the GD on you there, but just frustrated me. I can't, when I'm in a different screen, I can't see that I'm not showing you. There's your growth in administrative staff versus teachers and students. Notice the student is the thing that grew the least per capita. Students, there's only 5% more students. There's 5% more students adjusted for population than there was in 1971. But there's 95% more administrators. And at the same time, the spending per student, there's 150% more spending per student with the same amount of students, and teachers are poorly paid. And everybody's pointing the finger at everybody else. If you say teachers are not underpaid versus the total cost that we pay as property taxpayers, people yell at you and scream at you, and teachers deserve to make $200,000 a year, whatever fucking number would make them happy. But nobody says, why is this the case? So I really encourage you, if you've never spent some time on the website, again, WTF happened in 1971. I encourage you to spend some time there. And sorry for messing up and not showing you what I said I was showing you. But you can look, and over, you can see electricity, food, and fruit pricing. That's 1971 where that arrow is. Goes back to 51. The line is relatively flat. It goes freaking parabolic right there on that inflection point. Median home price in New York and Boston, right there, 1971, parabolic. What's this one? Real house prices and rents index, parabolic, 1971. Real house prices and rents indexed again here, right there, 1971. Boom, through the roof by 2020, right? How long does it take to save for a house? 1970, 2.4 years of work to save for a house. 1960, 2.6 months. 1950, 2.3 months. You see how it's like all the same? Like you're splitting hairs in difference between 2.3 years and 2.6 years. Does it really matter? That's as steady as she goes with an economic situation. Then in 1980, 3.8, 1990, 5.4, right? I'll just check it real quick to make sure I didn't screw up again. 2007 years, 2010, 7 years, 2020, 6.9 years. That was when the COVID was going on. I don't know where it is today, but it's probably more like 8.5 years. Where did it start? 1971. And you can just keep looking over and over. And you can't have, like, I know correlation doesn't equal causation. That's a phrase you were taught to say when anybody shows you something like this, as long as it conflicts with the narrative. If it matches the narrative, you're not supposed to say a word, right? If it proves that the polar bears are dying because you breathe too much, then you're not supposed to question correlation and causation. But if it conflicts with the narrative, you are. You should always question it. But when you have a consistent correlation with multiple causations, okay, you're in a different world here. This is not something you can argue away. You can't make this go away. You can't make adjusted inflation that looks like a flat line back to the year 1800 and only spikes in the year 1971 go away with words. You can't. You can't do any, and it's seed, how much seed oil we consume. It's how much freaking junk food we eat. It's every freaking thing goes back to that one inflection point. And guess what you can do about it? If you mean what can you do to change it for everybody, the answer is you can't do anything. You can't do one thing. You'll never vote this away. The only way this ever goes away, and people, when it happens, they'll think they voted away, but what will really happen is the system will collapse and the new power structure will have to build on a new system. And that rebuilding will look like change because the people, no, it won't be changed because you voted for it. It will be changed because it completely collapsed. Or before it completely collapses, the people benefiting from it will realize we're a decade away. We've been putting it off. We've kicked the can. We got to do something. We got to build something different. And it will still be built on a perverse incentive. It'll just be a new perverse incentive that will create a reset. That's all. That's the great reset. Yeah. All right. So what can you do? Well, if it's you mean, how do I make my life better inside the orbit of your sphere of control and a little bit outside of your sphere of influence, this is what you can do. With healthcare, use alternative solutions like a DPC. That's a direct primary care doctor. Your cost of healthcare will go down dramatically. If you pay for your own health insurance, then pair that up with a health share or a Christian health program or something like that will cost you a fraction of regular insurance. And it may not cover some things that regular insurance does, but you'll be able to afford those things because you don't need car insurance to pay for your oil changes and your gas fill-ups. That's not what insurance is for. Insurance is for catastrophic failures, right? So, I mean, one of the big reasons people want insurance for their health is because they're on like 15 different drugs because their doctor put them on 3 for things that were supposedly wrong with them and then put them on 3 more to fix the side effects of those 3, and then needed 2 more to fix the side effects of those 3, and then they had another problem, which is actually a side effect, diagnosed as a new condition, and often these doctors don't even go back and evaluate what they already have you on. They just add a drug because the insurance company pays them more, right? Well, how do you prevent that? Stay healthy and only go on a drug for an acute condition over a prescribed period. If you're going to go on a drug for a chronic condition, the conversation you need to have with your doctor is how long I'm going to take this. And when they say for the rest of your life, then you need to talk to another doctor at least before you make that decision. I'm not going to say you shouldn't because you might be a type 1 diabetic and that drug is insulin injected. And that will keep you alive instead of you like dying. But most of the time when we put people on these drugs, especially like SSRIs because you're depressed, right? Shit like that. And then all of a sudden that creates that cascade effect of maintenance medication, right? You should not go on a drug without knowing how do I get off the drug? And if the answer is you don't, then you need like, well, what happens if I don't go on the drug? And if you don't have a doctor that will have that conversation with you, get a new doctor, and a DPC will have that conversation. Every one of them will have that conversation with you. The health share keeps the cost down and then stay healthy. So like One of the things we need to get RFK to ban seed oils. How about you just don't eat food with seed oil in it? I want real tallow fries. Steak and Shake has them. And then you tell the person, no, they don't. The fries they cook for you are battered and soaked in seed oil and then frozen. They take them out of the freezer and fry them in tallow. It's still laced with seed oils. Well, what am I going to do? I gotta have French fries. Get a potato, cut it into pieces, put tallow in a pot, fry your own fucking potatoes. Now, I personally think you'd be better off without the carbohydrates as a whole, but there would be a step in the right direction, right? We shouldn't have all these artificial food dyes in our cereal. First of all, most of the cereal is garbage even without the food dyes. Second of all, don't eat food with food dyes in it. See, that was always allowed. Stay healthy. Get on any diet that isn't the standard American diet. Anything where you critically evaluate all the food that goes in your whole will make you a healthier person, make your cost of care lower, and therefore open up alternative ways that you can insure against catastrophe. It'd be great if the government would get out of the way and allow us to once again purchase catastrophic health insurance. In other words, I got hit by a car, I got cancer, right? I had a heart attack, right? Not I want cradle to grave somebody to pay for my shit. The healthier you are, the more you can take the alternatives to get you closer to that reality. Degrees, ditch the quest for the degree. If you already have one, figure out what you can do based on what you have, right? But young people and parents guiding young people, the idea that you need a degree is retarded. To be successful today, you do not need a degree. You need skills. Sometimes the career path or the skill set that you need dictates that a degree path is the right path. If that's the case, pursue it intelligently, including figuring out things like, can I go to school cheaper for my first 2 years, transfer to the more expensive school and complete it there? If you're going to be a doctor, sometimes you really have to think about where do I go and do my pre-graduate work? Where am I going to get into medical school? You have to think a little bit differently. But for most people, it doesn't matter where you do your first 2 years of college. If you're going to get kind of a run-of-the-mill degree, go to community college for two years, as long as you know what the eventual degree is going to do for you. Otherwise, learn a skill, right? And it can be a trade skill or it can be a technical skill. You can learn a tremendous amount about coding. And today with AI, you can accelerate that so fast because the coders of tomorrow will all use AI. It doesn't mean that they won't have to know how to code at all. Trust me, all you people that think AI is going to do everything, you're people that don't use AI. When you use AI, and let me tell you what using AI does not mean this. I got a long letter from Renee in Human Resources. So I had AI read the long-ass letter, summarize it to me, and spit out an output for an email to send back to Renee that makes you feel like I read her email. That's not what I mean by use AI. I mean, you actually build something with it. You create articles with it. You actually care about the output. You're trying to code a web app. If you do anything like that with AI, you quickly realize the person who doesn't know how to do anything can't do anything except put out garbage. That's obviously AI generated garbage. You have to know what you're doing and use AI as an accelerator. And that definitely includes writing code. So there's very high tech things you can do, very professional oriented things you can do without a degree that have educational paths to pursue. And then there is money in trades. And if you want something that's AI proof, figuring out how to get a pipe through that header and that ceiling over there and around that corner without putting too many 90s in it to meet code, AI ain't doing that shit. Even if the guy doing the blueprints uses AI to figure it out, the guy that puts the pipe in is going to have to work in the field. AI is not going to go out to an oil field and do the welding that gets a rig back online. And that job pays for an experienced welder about $160,000 a year right now. And I admit, I don't want to work in an oil field and weld. I don't either. I just gave you a freaking spectrum of extremes. Hard-ass, blue-collar trade, professional working on a computer, and everything in the middle. If you're going to say anything other than, yeah, that makes sense, you're making an excuse because you want to justify a lifestyle choice to go to college for the experience, not just the education. Trust me, you can go spend a year backpacking across Europe. Hell, backpack across your own beautiful country for a fraction of that and get plenty of life experience, right? And you can even hustle your way across, like the girl I've told the story about, who we met in Asheville, my wife and I, when we were on vacation there, and she was driving Uber and Lyft so that she could live in different places. All she would do is move to a new place, transfer her credentials to that state, and start driving people immediately. She was using some low-end like an Airbnb for more like finding rooms. So like she had a place to stay, and she was saving money and paying off her student loans while she tried. That's experience. She had friends. She was going out. She was making and saving money and paying off debt at the same time. And she just took that year sabbatical while hustling. Okay, I don't know where she is today, but I bet you it's somewhere good. I bet you it's somewhere good. I bet you somewhere, someplace, she's giving some younger person advice, and they're telling her how lucky she is. No, she made a different choice. Ditch the degree as the default, right? I'm not saying no one get a degree. I'm saying ditch the degree as a default, because I always get pushback when I talk about this. You don't think anybody should have a degree. I don't know where you get that bullshit. Maybe I said it in a way that made you realize your degree was stupid and you didn't like that, so you had to change what I said to make yourself feel better. You're proof of everything I'm saying today if that's you. Shelter should serve you, not enslave you. What does that mean? It means you don't need the house you think you do. And there's so many people, I can't find a house anywhere. There's no houses where I live that are under $500,000, and I make a lot of money. I make 80 grand a year, and my wife makes 65, and we can't afford any houses anywhere where I live. Where do you live, man? And they tell you. And you go to like Redfin, and in 5 minutes, you give them 3 homes that are in their price range. In fact, below their price range. But that one isn't where there's night activities. We're young and we want to have fun. And shut the fuck up. Okay? That one looks like it needs a new roof. Then learn to put roofing on. Okay? There's only 3 bedrooms there and we want 4. I thought you had no kids. My wife and I both need an office. So use 1 bedroom and the other 2 bedrooms for offices. We need a guest room. How often are you going to have guests? You don't understand anything. See? It's this shit over and over again. And if you're a young person, I can't buy a house, and he didn't get to my excuse, right? If I kept going, I would. I have to get done with this. I have other things to do today. I guarantee you, I've heard your excuse, your reason that's actually an excuse. I'm not saying it's easy. And if you just figured out, hey, I should like become a homeowner, and you're like 29, and you haven't done anything to meet that goal until today. When you look at and you don't have shit in like reserve liquid savings for a down payment, and you haven't been building your credit for this moment, and you haven't been living smart up to this point, and you haven't learned the things necessary to transition to homeowner from renter, you haven't done any of that, you're starting for basically, even though you're 29 years old, you're starting at 0. Well, then your path might be till you're 35. And what will happen, because that's your path, you won't take one step on it, and one day you'll be 35 saying the same thing. And when I tell you what you need to do to get there by 33, you'll say it's too long and you aren't willing to do the work, because I have to have time with my friends. I have to have a life. I was just told when I did the interview with Tom Woods by a young person who thinks everything is my fault, that he doesn't have what he's supposed to have, that when I said you should work 60 hours a week if you're in your 20s, that I'm not realistic. Yeah, I'm not realistic. You should probably be working 80. I was sandbagging at 60, just saying. And as I said yesterday when I talked about that a little bit, when I say work 60, I don't mean necessarily that all 60 of those hours you're getting paid for. Work on yourself, your knowledge, your skills, etc., so that you could make more money. And if you spend your time educating yourself, you're probably not spending your time pissing your money away. You see how that works? Next up, if you're holding money, cash, and the only reason to save cash at this point is I'm going to spend it within the next 5 years. I have a specific goal for it. And even adjusting for inflation, I know the number, and I'm saving a fixed amount of money to hit that number, like for a down payment on a house. Cash is beautiful for that. It sucks that it gets eroded in value, but holding cash long-term is foolish, because it's a system that is designed to steal your wealth. Your number can go up in cash and your wealth can go down at the same time. In fact, let me bring this back up for you right here on the graph. That is the national debt of the United States of America. The graph is so tall, for those who can't see it, that starting in 1971, that's where the arrow is. It's a flat line from 1940. And up until about the year 2010, it's like halfway up. By the time you get to 2020, you can't even see the top of the graph. And by the way, that number right there is 24 trillion. So right here in 2020, it's like 23.25 trillion dollars. If that graph kept going, it's like 36 trillion. It would be up here in the next graph. That's where that is now. That's the debt of the country. But what I want you to understand, that's also the devaluation of the dollar in reverse. If you flip this graph upside down, it correlates to the devaluation of the dollar perfectly, because one is a direct extension of the other. In other words, when I print a new dollar, it can only get value from one place, the existing dollars. That's how it works. It's not like, okay, we're going to print $1 trillion worth of money this year, so we better go get $1 trillion worth of shit to back it with. I mean, I don't want to go into monetary creation like all the way through it today. We haven't done a show on that in a while. Maybe we should again. It's an important thing to understand. But you just understand the most basic thing. Like, I'm going to make new dollars. That's what the government says when they're printing money. It has to get value from something. It has to get value from something. What does it get value from? Does the fairy godmother come and decree that there shall be $1 trillion new value in the country to base the inflation on? No. The only thing it can do is suck value from the old. If there was $2 in circulation, I know that doesn't seem possible, but let's say we could fractionalize them into billions per dollar, right? But this will make it easy to understand, because trillion, your brain shuts off, right? A trillion is 1,000 billion, and a billion's 1,000 million. You can't think that way in your head. It won't work. So let's say there's $2 in circulation in an economy. Maybe not the whole economy. $2 in circulation economy. Each dollar can be broken into 1 million pennies, and a penny has the relative purchasing power right now of $1, right? But we're going to go back to this $2 at the top. $2. And I print one new dollar, and I add it to the economy, and I add nothing to the economy other than one new dollar. Now there's more dollars, making more pennies, more money in circulation. Everybody over time who is involved in economic activity ends up with more units, but there's no more value than there was before. So what just happened is this new dollar sucked 1/3 of the value out of the existing $2, and it's just spread the value out over less units. That's as easy as I can make understanding monetary inflation. It's not that direct, because there is some growth in the underlying value of the economy, but the inflation always exceeds it. And the stated goal, like the Federal Reserve says, we have done our job well if unemployment remains low and inflation stays at about 2.5%. We get an A+ for that. So by stealing 2% to 3% of the value of your money every year, the Federal Reserve has done an A+ job by their own way that they give themselves a report card. And they usually fail, and it's more like 4 to 5%, and the real number is more like 8%, and the real cost of capital long term is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12%, and as high as 20%, even in the United States. And in third world countries, forget about it. You can lose 50% of the value of your capital annually. So if you hold dollars, in any money management firm, any money manager, investment manager knows this term well: cash is trash. So it only is for short-term storage. It's a shitty battery for short-term storage, right? That's what it is. It's not a supercapacitor. So what is the alternative? Bitcoin, real assets, and this is a simple way to know, am I holding an asset or a liability? If you're holding an asset, you can borrow against it. You have a paid-for home, you can take a loan out against it. If you have a home, you owe $100,000 on it, but it's worth $300,000, you can borrow against the equity that you have. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying it's a litmus test. I own this thing, and I can borrow against it. That makes it an asset. If I own a thing, that I can't borrow against, I have a liability. Cash is a liability. I mean, in every single way that we measure liabilities, and that doesn't mean it's your liability. It means it's somebody's liability, which makes it vicariously your liability. That dollar was obtained by issuing debt, and then they issued the dollar against the debt. It's a certificate for debt. It's a liability. That's why you can't go to a bank, right? Imagine this. You go to a bank. How much money do you want to borrow? $5,000. Great. Let's look at your credit. No, it's okay. Yeah. What's your collateral? So I have like $10,000 in the bank. And what I'll do is the $5,000 that I have in cash, you guys can put that into some sort of locked account, and I don't get it back until I pay you. They won't do it. They won't do it. You can't use cash to borrow cash as a collateral. Isn't that insane? But you can take securities and borrow against them. Because a lender wants to lend a depreciating liability, cash, against an appreciating asset, real estate. That's why it's been the number one thing. But that's why the rich do it with artwork. Anything that on paper the number goes up on tends to be something you can borrow against. If it's a dependable, proven thing that's happened across time, that's why these loans against Bitcoin are coming now. Because earlier, even though it was a good bet, it was still a bet. It didn't have enough of a long-time track record. Now it does. So it's an asset if you can borrow against it. And if you can't borrow against it, it's a liability. It's just a different way of thinking. It'll change the way you manage your money. Then build local. Build whatever you're building, at least on some level locally. I have an international business in my podcast. I really do. Even just like my wife and I last night were just thinking how lucky we are that we live in the world that we do, and we've been able to capitalize the way we have. We just pulled up the reports on the book, Laws of Life, and we're like, we've sold actually quite a few books in Mexico. We've sold books in the Philippines. We've sold books in France. We've sold books in the United Kingdom. We've sold books in Canada. So we have an international business. But I'll tell you what, TSP has a hell of a Dallas-Fort Worth contingent, a big one. So even in online business, we have like a local power center here that's affiliated with us. And that's just a piece of it. But I mean, if you're going to build a business that's not like a fully online business, you really need to build locally. That's where your strength is. You keep your money in the local economy, create a circular economy, reduce the entropy of the value of your economy. When you're taking a liability cash to buy something from outside your economy and transferring your wealth, even with that shitty battery to somewhere else, you are part of the sucking sound, pulling the value out of your local community. So build locally, opt out, watch and work the incentives. You need to understand the incentives are perverse, but you need to understand what that means for you so that you build your life design and your leverage protocol for the system that is versus the system you think should be. I mean, this is like, especially in the libertarian world, libertarians tend to end up poor. Actually, I want to put it differently. Libertarians tend to end up poor or wealthy. Not a lot of middle class libertarians. And what I mean by that is if they're building businesses, if they're trying to be independent, right? If they're trying to live their ethos. You can have a guy that's a libertarian-minded person that's a aerospace engineer for Lockheed. He's probably going to do pretty well for himself, right? Puts his money in his 401k, blah, blah, blah. He'll end up with some money. But when you step out and build things as a libertarian, you either become very wealthy, very poor. I'm actually a conundrum. I have like an upper middle class income, right? That's actually not normal for libertarians. They're either big time. They're, multi-millionaires, billionaires, captains of industry, or they're poor. And the reason is because they look at the system incentives, and one group says, nothing I can do about it. This is how you build a business in this system because it is what it is, not what I want it to be. And another says, I'm not doing that, right? Occasionally you'll find somebody like me. We live our principles, but we're also realists, and we're able to carve out a niche for ourselves that makes us comfortable and happy without becoming super wealthy. But it's not normal. And I challenge you to look around you And see, like the people that really speak the libertarian talk, many of them are dead broke. And many of them did okay for a while. They die broke. Like one of the best known would be Harry Brown. Dude died with almost no money. Right? Because he was so stuck on the way things should be, he couldn't accept the way things were. Last, you need to build businesses, income streams, or systems that replace expenses. This is also about going home to homestead, right? So like you can either make more money or spend less money. And if those two sides balance, it's the same net effect. So let me explain. Let's say that you make just a round number, 100 grand a year. That's your household income. Take home after tax, 100 grand a year. If you go out and figure out how to earn $20,000 a year more that you keep after you pay tax, you get $20,000 net increase in income. You now have $120,000 income. You have $20,000 more of income. If you make the same money, you put a system in place that saves you $20,000 a year of expenses, and you move your expenses down $20,000, your net income goes up. That's entrepreneurial thinking, even if you don't run a business. So again, let's say I have a business. Business does $1 million a year in revenue, has $500,000 a year expenses. Just to make it round number, it's a $500,000 a year business as far as profit. Yeah. And I pay myself $250,000 a year out of that, and I use the other $250,000 to reinvest in the business and pay my one or two, low-level employees. I'm small, very small concern. Yeah. Okay. If I can grow my business to 1.1 million next year, I can give myself a raise of 100 grand. So I can go to 350, but I'm probably going to give some to my employees, right? Not because I'm just generous, but because if I don't pay them a little bit more, they'll quit. So I can increase my income by 100 grand, take 75 for myself, and give 12.5 to each employee. That's a big raise at their level. They're fucking happy for a while. I might not have to give them a raise next year now. I might 2 years before I give them a raise again. In fact, I might put some of the money aside, give them half the raise, so I already have it in the bank to give them another raise, because no matter how much I give them, they're always going to want more, and I know that. Okay? But that's how that would work. Now, let's say I go from $1 million this year to $1 million next year, but I cut my expenses from $500,000 to $400,000. It's the same net effect. Any business owner knows this. They're always working both sides of the balance sheet. How do I make number go up on income? How do I make number go down on expense? Or how do I make number go down on expense relative to income? Sometimes I have to spend more to make more, but can I leverage that? If I can spend $50,000 to make $100,000 more, I'll probably do it. If I can spend $50,000 to make $250,000 more, I'm gonna do it. You see how that works? Very simple. But then we turn and everybody gets that. And demands a raise because they get that, and they understand their company made more money last year and cut expenses, and they helped, but they don't run their own household that way. They don't run their own household that way. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, those are your steps. That's what you have to do. If you want to improve your position, you can't cry about it. You can't blame anybody for it. You can't tell anybody it's their fault. You can't vote your way out of it. You can't petition your way out of it. You can't march in the streets your way out of it. There's no way out of it. It's a trap until you decide that you no longer want to stay in the maze. So think about it like a rat maze. You're in the rat maze, and the cheese that is retirement and living the life that you think the boomers are living 30 years from now, that's the cheese in the center of the maze. Okay, and you're going to keep going through the maze. A lot of times the rat dies before he gets to the cheese. When you get to the cheese, eventually you find out it wasn't all that, and now it's too late. You spent all your life energy. Your dash is very short. You're almost ready to cash the chips in, and you can't leave because the cheese is all you got. That's why your grandfather gets upset when anybody says the word Social Security without saying protect it at the same time, because he's sitting on that piece of cheese, and that's all he's got left. That's where he is. It's all he's got. And if he loses it, he has nothing left. No one wants to hire him. No one's going to give him a job. There's no way he can afford to live. It's all gone if that disappears. You're in that maze with him. You're just 30 years earlier, 40 years earlier. But the walls aren't that high. Climb the fucking wall. Cut a hole in the wall. Get out of the maze. Take a different path. Make your own cheese. I know that sounds oversimplified. Guys, I've said it over and over again. Just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy. It's not about working hard. just to work hard. You have to look at the situation and work the system to leverage your own abilities to your own maximum benefit. I mean, I almost said work smarter, not harder, but it's so cliche and it's so bullshit. The way I just gave it to you, that's really what it's about. It's about identifying your opportunities for leverage and using that leverage. And what most people do is they refuse to use that leverage because insert excuse here. Excusing won't work at all. The excuses won't work at all. I only got one comment going through this. It came from your mother. And she said, blaming the boomers rests on the assumption of representative government. If the government during the generation created a corrupt, disgusting mess, then we blame the people that made it, right? So if we had a representative government, but we don't. And if you think we had a representative government in 1971, then you're wrong. We didn't. The corporations, like if we had a representative government, we wouldn't have got a Federal Reserve in 1913 because that right there meant that we didn't have, because nobody wanted it, right? If we had a representative government, then FDR would have been able to seize the nation's gold and revalue it and devalue the dollar by almost half overnight by fiat if we had a representative government. So we do not have a representative government. So I don't know if your mother, that's just the person's handle for those who weren't here, right, is making that claim because she believes it's valid or invalid. I don't know. It wasn't clear in the comment. But she's right. If we had a truly representative government and for multiple iterations of that representative government, a specific generation installed these policies because it's what they wanted. And if they had voted a different way, we wouldn't have gotten the same policies. Then you could blame those generations that did that, right? But that's not what happened. Again, 1971, your average boomer was 22 years old and didn't vote. And they were out in the street burning bras and protesting wars. And again, the young people today, blaming them, you should look at those people as your heroes. They're doing the same things that you guys find virtuous today. You just have different causes. So I don't know if that was meant to pile on or to mitigate, but that's my response to it. With that, I'm going to wrap up. I don't have an item of the day for you today, but please consider going by tspaz.com today if you're going to shop online, and just use the resources there before you buy something, even if you're going to buy it anyway, and that will help us out no matter what you buy. And if you haven't picked up a copy of my book yet, Laws of Life, Ditch the System, Design Your Life by Jack Spirko, please do so. If you know a young person and you think, boy, they could have really used the 2x4 that this man was throwing down today, but they'll never, ever, ever sit and listen to it, get them a copy of the book. Send it to them. They just might read it. Take care, guys. I'll be with you guys tomorrow with Joel Riles, and we'll have a great interview because Joel is always a great interview. Thursday, we will have an expert council Q&A, and then next week we'll do it all again.